The guy's special. I've been in this game my whole life. I've never seen anything like him. This guy is one of the most special fighters I've ever seen, if not the most special guy that I've ever come across.
I'm the most dangerous guy here. I got a gun for everyone. I kill everybody.
From the wrestling mats of Chechnya to the bright lights of the octagon, one man has carved a path of destruction through the UFC like no other. Khamzat Borz Chimaev. Undefeated, undeniable, unstoppable. Still undefeated and likely coming to a title fight near you, Khamzat. 17 seconds. That's all it took for Khamzat Chimaev to announce himself as the UFC's newest nightmare. One devastating right hand, and Gerald Meerschaert was unconscious before he hit the canvas. But this wasn't just a knockout. This was the moment the world discovered a fighter whose journey from war-torn Chechnya to the top of the UFC would be unlike anything we'd ever seen. The man they call Borz the Wolf has an undefeated record that tells only half the story, because behind every devastating finish, every impossible takedown, every moment of pure violence lies a tale of survival that makes his fighting career seem almost secondary. This is the story of a refugee who fled one of the world's most dangerous conflicts, only to become one of the most feared men on the planet. Khamzat Chimaev was born on May 1, 1994 in the small village of Gudermes. Chechnya was burning. The First Chechen War had just begun, and this tiny republic in Russia's North Caucasus region was about to become a hellscape of guerrilla warfare, bombings, and systematic destruction. For the next decade and a half, this would be Khamzat's reality. Imagine growing up where the sound of gunfire is your alarm clock, where going to school means navigating checkpoints and wondering if today's the day an explosion happens near your classroom. This wasn't some distant conflict you read about in history books. This was daily life for a Chechen child named Khamzat, who started wrestling at age 5, not because he dreamed of athletic glory, but because physical strength might be the difference between life and death. The wrestling club was just across the street from his family's home, but even that short walk carried risks. Chechnya, during the 1990s and 2000s, was a place where civilians disappeared, where entire families were caught in crossfires between Russian forces and Chechen rebels, where children learned to duck at the sound of helicopters overhead. But inside that wrestling room, Khamzat found something pure, something that made sense when nothing else did. He was a natural, grinding through opponents with a ferocity that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than just athletic competition. By his teenage years, he'd earned a bronze medal at the Russian national championships at the junior level. The kid from the war zone was becoming a force. His older brother had already made the choice that would change everything. In the early 2000s, he'd managed to get to Sweden, joining the wave of Chechen refugees seeking asylum in Western Europe. Sweden, with its generous refugee policies and peaceful society, was about as far from Chechnya as you could get, both geographically and spiritually. His brother worked, got his papers, established himself, and then made the call that would reshape Khamzat's entire existence. Khamzat recalled that his brother had been living there before and told the family that moving would be good for them. They stayed, and they liked it, since people helped them a lot. He said that, at first, it was hard for him. He was only 19 and didn't want to leave his friends. When they arrived, it was just a very small village. He didn't know anyone there, and there wasn't even a gym at the time. But leaving wasn't simple. Russia's new leadership had intensified hostilities in Chechnya. This wasn't a family vacation where you pack some bags and catch a flight. This was abandoning everything you've ever known, possibly forever, for a country where you don't speak the language, don't understand the culture, and have absolutely no guarantee of survival, let alone success. In 2013, when Khamzat was 18 years old, he made that journey with his mother, his friends, his entire identity as a Chechen wrestler, and stepped into the unknown. The destination was Kalmar, Sweden, where his brother was waiting with promises of safety and opportunity. He found local wrestling clubs and dove back into the sport that had been his sanctuary during the war years. The transition wasn't smooth, but his talent was undeniable. Within a few years, Khamzat Chimaev became a dominant force in Swedish wrestling. He won the Swedish Freestyle National Championships 3 times, twice at 86 kilograms in 2016 and 2017, and once at 92 kilograms in 2018. His tournament record was perfect, 12-0 with 3 pins, 7 technical falls, and a combined score of 105 points, while allowing only 2 against him. At 23 years old, most elite fighters are already well into their professional careers. As for Khamzat Chimaev, he was just discovering mixed martial arts. Jon Jones was already the youngest UFC champion in history when he was 23 years of age. He joined All Stars Training Center in Stockholm, one of Europe's premier MMA gyms. Suddenly, he was training alongside UFC veterans like Alexander Gustafsson, who'd gone 12 rounds with Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier in title fights. There was Ilir Latifi, a UFC light heavyweight who'd been competing at the highest level for years, and Reza Madadi, a former UFC lightweight who became Khamzat's primary coach. These weren't just training partners, they were his introduction to what elite-level mixed martial arts actually looked like. Gustafsson, in particular, became something of a mentor, showing this raw refugee kid what it meant to represent Sweden on the world's biggest stage. But Khamzat brought something to the gym that even these UFC veterans hadn't seen, a hunger that went beyond normal athletic ambition. According to Alexander Gustafsson, Khamzat simply outtrains everybody. In his words, there's nobody who trains like him, nobody. Gustafsson, who has traveled the world watching fighters prepare for battle, admitted he had never seen anything like it. Chimaev doesn't get tired, doesn't feel pain, and just pushes straight through. Gustafsson even compared his potential to legends of the sport, asking if Khamzat carried that Khabib factor, that GSP factor. Could he go down as the greatest fighter of all time? For Gustafsson, the answer was clear, 100% yes. His amateur career was brief but perfect. 3 fights, 3 wins, all by finish. The first opponent was future MAAF world champion Khalid Lama, whom Khamzat submitted in the second round with a Bravo choke. Next was Daniel Gerbic, submitted by guillotine choke in the second round. Finally, Adnan Muskic knocked out in the first round. Each fight was more dominant than the last. Coaches and training partners began to whisper that they were watching something special. This wasn't just a talented athlete picking up mixed martial arts. This was a natural predator discovering his true calling. On May 26, 2018, Khamzat made his professional debut against guard Olve Sagan at International Ring Fight Arena 14 in Sweden. Technical knockout, second round. 3 months later, he submitted Magne with a rear naked choke at Fight Club Rush 3. The pattern was already clear. Khamzat didn't just win fights, he ended them. Brave Combat Federation, a major Middle Eastern promotion, came calling. This was Khamzat's introduction to fighting outside Sweden, to facing international competition, to the pressure of representing something bigger than himself. Over 4 fights with Brave CF, he went 4-0 with 3 finishes. The performances were so dominant that UFC scouts began taking notice. But here's the thing about Khamzat's rise that gets lost in all the highlight reels and knockout compilations. He was still figuring out who he was, not just as a fighter, but as a person. He was a Chechen by birth, a Swedish resident by circumstance, a Russian citizen by passport, and increasingly a global phenomenon by choice. In 2020, the moment finally came when the UFC called. For fight fans, this was the kind of debut that immediately drew attention, the arrival of someone you couldn't look away from. Khamzat's debut was set for the 15th of July 2020 at UFC Fight Night on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. His opponent was John Phillips, a seasoned Welsh veteran with over 20 professional bouts and a reputation for toughness. The UFC's intention was to give Chimaev a measured entry into the big leagues, a durable veteran who could test him without posing undue risk. The kind of matchmaking designed to see how a newcomer handled the pressure. Normally, prospects are developed slowly, 1 fight, then months off, a gradual climb. Khamzat tore that script apart in just 10 days. His first performance was so dominant, so technically flawless, that UFC matchmakers immediately reconsidered their plans. What was supposed to be a cautious introduction became the unveiling of something extraordinary. Instead of taking time off, just 10 days later, Chimaev was back inside the octagon, this time against Rhys McKee. Such a schedule was unheard of. Most fighters spend months recovering, adjusting, and preparing between bouts. For Chimaev, it was simply another opportunity to prove his superiority. 2 fights in 10 days. 2 finishes, 0 damage taken. Social media erupted. Hardcore MMA fans flooded timelines with highlights, while casual sports fans were suddenly discovering the name Khamzat Chimaev. His Instagram following skyrocketed from nearly nothing to hundreds of thousands in a matter of days. But the UFC had one more test in mind, and this one would change everything. Gerald Meerschaert was intended to be the reality check, a crafty veteran with 44 professional fights, proven grappling skills, and enough experience to expose any holes in a rising prospect's game. He had faced top competition before and was exactly the kind of fighter designed to humble an overhyped newcomer. The buildup was tense. Meerschaert dismissed Khamzat's untested rise and warned that in real fights, resistance always comes. He spoke with the confidence of a seasoned veteran, even pointing to his grappling credentials as proof that he could shut down the hype. There were even small confrontations during fight week, fueling the narrative of a true veteran against a brash upstart. On the 19th of September 2020, at UFC Fight Night in Las Vegas, Khamzat Chimaev and Gerald Meerschaert stood across from each other in the octagon. Veteran versus rookie, experience versus raw talent. The old guard versus the new breed. What happened next stunned the MMA world. Veterans don't get starched by a single punch from a newcomer. Experienced fighters don't fall that quickly, that cleanly, that devastatingly. But Khamzat wasn't just any newcomer. He was a man forged by war, rebuilt from nothing in a foreign land, and obsessed with becoming the most dangerous fighter alive. The 17-second knockout was not an accident, it was destiny. In just over 2 months, across 3 fights, Khamzat Chimaev had transformed from an unknown prospect into must-see television. He collected 3 Performance of the Night bonuses worth $150,000, finished all of his opponents, and absorbed almost no damage. His total fight time across those 3 bouts was less than 8 minutes. The comparisons to Khabib Nurmagomedov came quickly, but they irritated Khamzat. He didn't want to be seen as Khabib too. He wanted to be recognized as himself, a fighter who could wrestle, submit, knock out, and overwhelm anyone in front of him. And he seemed to have everything: relentless wrestling, knockout power, endless cardio, mental toughness, shaped by survival itself. At just 26 years old, Khamzat Chimaev looked unstoppable. But by the end of 2020, an unexpected opponent appeared COVID-19, a threat that nearly ended his career before it truly began. The timeline of Khamzat Chimaev's battle with COVID reads like a medical horror story. In December 2020, he was scheduled to fight Leon Edwards, a top contender in what would have been a massive step up in competition. Edwards had to withdraw after contracting COVID himself, and the fight was rescheduled for January 2021. This time, it was Khamzat who tested positive. At first, the situation seemed like a minor setback. Many fighters were navigating COVID protocols. The expectation was that Khamzat would recover, the fight would be postponed again, and life would move on. But Khamzat did not recover properly, not fully. His jiu-jitsu coach, Alan Nascimento, later described the ordeal as nightmarish. The virus affected Khamzat rapidly, causing every conceivable symptom, including severe difficulty breathing. His condition worsened in the middle of the night, and there was fear that he would need urgent medical care. Nascimento flew back to Sweden with Khamzat as soon as they tested negative, hoping that familiar surroundings and proper medical treatment would help. X-rays and MRIs revealed serious lung damage, appearing similar to pneumonia or asthma. Yet Khamzat refused to accept the severity of his illness. Against all medical advice and the pleas of his team, he decided he was ready to return to training. He flew back to the United States alone, without coaches or training partners, believing that sheer willpower could restore his health. He showed up at Extreme Couture in Las Vegas, ready to spar and resume normal training. But his body finally forced him to face reality. Coughing, feeling ill, and requiring medical attention, he was eventually taken to a hospital. The psychological toll was immense. His team managed to get him back to Sweden, but the physical and mental impact lingered. For months, Khamzat battled not only the lingering physical effects of the virus, but also the terror that accompanies a serious health scare. In 2023, during an appearance on the Full Send podcast, Khamzat recounted the darkest moment of his health crisis. a misdiagnosis that almost completely broke him. A doctor had told him he might have cancer, prompting him to announce his retirement. Uncertain how to explain this to his family or fans, he faced despair while still coughing up blood. Subsequent medical evaluation revealed that he did not have cancer, but the trauma and ongoing symptoms were crushing. On the 2nd of March 2021, Khamzat posted what appeared to be a retirement announcement on Instagram, expressing gratitude to his supporters and sharing an image of blood he had coughed up that morning. For someone whose identity was built on being unstoppable, admitting weakness was nearly unbearable. His manager, Majdi Shamaz, later revealed how dire the situation had been, describing moments when Khamzat believed he might die, even while in hospital care. Dana White refused to accept the retirement. Having invested so much in Khamzat's future and recognizing his potential, White flew him to Las Vegas for treatment, placing him on prednisone and other medications to ensure that recovery was taken seriously. Despite the medical supervision, Khamzat's struggle continued. He went through emotional turmoil, training sessions where he felt physically terrible, and moments of despair that were shared publicly. In total, he was away from competition for 13 months, a period filled with uncertainty over whether his prior dominance was real or a product of favorable circumstances. Other contenders advanced during this time, while Khamzat, the Borz, remained in training facilities, questioning if he would ever return to his previous form. When the UFC announced Khamzat Chimaev's return, the matchup couldn't have been better. Li Jingliang, the Leech, a dangerous Chinese welterweight, fresh off a spectacular knockout of Santiago Ponzinibbio, ranked, experienced, powerful, exactly the kind of test that could expose whether Chimaev was still the same fighter. UFC 267, Abu Dhabi, October 30th, 2021. Half the MMA world believed the hype had burned out, that the long layoff and health problems had broken his momentum for good. The other half waited to see if the nightmare from before COVID was still real. The answer came in just 3 minutes. Chimaev shut Li down completely, dominating every second, finishing the fight without absorbing a single significant strike. Li wasn't just a good fighter, he was a ranked contender with real knockout power, and yet he looked like an overmatched regional prospect. It was a performance that defied logic. That night proved far more than physical ability. Coming back from the edge of retirement, Chimaev showed mental toughness that elevated him to another level. The victory earned him a performance bonus, restored his place in the title picture, and, more importantly, confirmed that COVID had been nothing more than a detour, not the end of the road. Next came the fight that would push Khamzat Chimaev to the limit. Gilbert Burns at UFC 273. Burns wasn't just another contender. He was a former title challenger, a world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a knockout threat, and one of the most complete welterweights alive. Just a year earlier, he had dropped Kamaru Usman in a title fight before falling in the third round, proof of how dangerous he truly was. This matchup was designed to answer every lingering question. Could Chimaev handle elite striking? Could he survive world-class grappling? Could he perform when he wasn't dictating the pace, but being forced onto the back foot? Could he endure adversity inside the cage the same way he had outside of it? April 9th, 2022, Jacksonville, Florida. The undefeated Phenom versus the hardened veteran. Hype against reality, future against present. The fight was brutal, chaotic, and unforgettable. For the first time, Chimaev bled, tired, and felt the grind of true championship-level opposition. Yet, he refused to break. The Burns fight changed everything. It proved Khamzat was human, and paradoxically, that made him even more frightening. Because if he could look vulnerable against an elite opponent and still find a way to win, what would he become once he put it all together? But just as his momentum was building again, just as title shots were being discussed seriously, Khamzat's health issues returned with a vengeance. The weight cut for his scheduled bout against Nate Diaz at UFC 279 went disastrously wrong. Khamzat missed weight by 7.5 pounds, forcing a complete reshuffling of the card. During the weigh-in, officials stopped him when the scale hit 178.5 pounds. His body simply couldn't handle any more dehydration. Backstage, tensions escalated even further. Kevin Holland confronted Khamzat, and the two clashed in a heated argument that turned physical. Holland mocked him, saying he wasn't truly about the fighter's life, a moment that quickly went viral across social media. Even UFC President Dana White called it one of the strangest days he had ever experienced. The pre-fight press conference had to be canceled due to chaos behind the scenes. White later apologized publicly and confirmed that the matchups had been changed. Ironically, Chimaev would now face Holland instead. No amount of training or determination could fully mask the toll his body had taken. By 2023, another pattern was emerging. Khamzat was becoming increasingly distant from Sweden, the country that had once given him refuge and opportunity. Political tensions were growing over Quran burnings and other issues that deeply affected Muslim communities. For a proud Chechen Muslim like Khamzat, these weren't distant political debates, they were deeply personal insults. September 2023, Khamzat Chimaev's manager made an announcement that stunned the MMA world. Khamzat was permanently leaving Sweden and relocating to the United Arab Emirates. According to Majdi Shamas, the decision was final. Chimaev had officially immigrated and would no longer represent Sweden. The reason, he explained, was a personal choice to start a new life elsewhere. The fighter who had once sought refuge in Sweden was now beginning a new chapter. The man who had represented Swedish MMA on the global stage was trading Stockholm for Dubai and the All-Stars Training Center for brand new, world-class facilities in the Middle East. The move made perfect sense on several levels. The UAE offered better training conditions, elite gyms, a Muslim-majority culture that made Khamzat feel at home, and significant financial opportunities. Footage from his training sessions in Dubai showed a refreshed, focused athlete, sharper, stronger, and more dangerous than ever. Under the guidance of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion Alan Nascimento and other elite coaches, Chimaev's training reached a new level. His move to the UAE also marked a full transition to the middleweight division. The weight cuts to welterweight had become increasingly difficult, and his physique clearly fit better at 185 pounds. It was a smart career move, one that opened new doors while helping resolve the health struggles that had followed him for years. His first fight representing the United Arab Emirates took place at UFC 294 inches, Abu Dhabi, against former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman, who had recently moved up to middleweight. After more than a year away from competition, there were real questions about whether Khamzat could return to his peak after the health issues and the major life changes he had gone through. The answer was clear. He looked sharper, stronger, and more composed than ever. After the fight, Khamzat didn't focus on himself. Instead, he spoke about the bigger picture, about the suffering of children around the world, regardless of religion or nationality. He called for peace, kindness, and unity, showing a more mature and human side that resonated far beyond the cage. His next performance would confirm that this wasn't just a comeback, it was an evolution. Robert Whittaker, the former middleweight champion known for his technical brilliance and wars with elite fighters like Israel Adesanya and Yoel Romero, was seen as the ultimate test. If anyone could expose Khamzat, it would be Whittaker. On October 26, 2024, at UFC 308 inches, Abu Dhabi, the two finally met in what was essentially a #1 contender's fight. By that point, Khamzat wasn't fighting to prove he belonged among the best, he was fighting to prove he was ready to be champion. The fight ended in dominant fashion. Khamzat overpowered Whittaker and finished him with a choke that reportedly dislocated his opponent's jaw. It was a statement, a clear message to the division that he was coming for the belt. This victory wasn't just another win on his record. It marked the transformation of Khamzat Chimaev from a wild, fearless newcomer into a disciplined, dangerous contender, fully ready to rule the middleweight division. On the 13th of May 2025, the UFC officially announced that Khamzat Chimaev would face Dricus du Plessis for the middleweight title. After everything, the years of war, the refugee camps, the battle with COVID, the misdiagnoses, the relocations, and the constant health setbacks, Chimaev finally had his chance to fight for gold. But in September 2025, just weeks before the fight, the unthinkable almost happened again. Khamzat started experiencing breathing problems during camp, a familiar nightmare returning at the worst possible time. Doubts spread fast. Many questioned if his body could hold up under the pressure of another war inside the octagon. Yet the fight did happen, and it became one of the defining nights of his career. On the 16th of August 2025, at UFC 319 inches, Chicago, Chimaev stepped into the cage against Duplessis for 5 grueling rounds. He dominated with relentless wrestling, constant pressure, and controlled aggression. By the end of the 5th, there was no question who the better fighter was. The judges scored it 50-44, 50-44, and 50-44, a unanimous decision victory for Khamzat Chimaev. That night, the Borz finally became the UFC middleweight champion. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. A message to the world that even when his own body tried to betray him, his will refused to break. Today, Chimaev stands as the new king of the middleweight division, not because of talent alone, but because he's proven, time and time again, that the greatest fight is the one inside yourself. Question isn't whether Khamzat Chimaev is talented enough to be UFC champion. The real question is whether his body will allow him to reach the summit he has spent his entire life climbing. But one thing is clear about the wolf from Chechnya: he has never encountered an obstacle he could not eventually overcome. Whether it takes months or years, or whether he must reinvent himself once again, Khamzat Chimaev's story is far from finished. The boy who learned to fight because the world was fighting around him is not ready to stop now. When he returns, with his health finally aligned with his ambitions, the entire middleweight division will need to be ready. 17 seconds was all it took to introduce the world to Khamzat Chimaev. When he gets his next shot at greatness, those 25 minutes might finally be enough to crown him champion. This is more than a sports story. It is a testament to human resilience, the power of never giving up, and the fact that sometimes the greatest victories come not from what we achieve, but from what we survive. The wolf is still howling, still hunting, and still believing his time will come. After everything he has been through, after every obstacle he has overcome, it is hard not to believe in him. This incredible journey inspires, reminding us that real stories like Khamzat's are why we fell in love with fighting in the first place. If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new incredible fights and real stories from true fighters. Stay with us, there's even more adrenaline and victories coming your way.